Jake Wilson sat at his small desk in his tiny apartment. The roof leaked right above his bed. He put a bucket there to catch the water. His stomach made loud noises. He had not eaten since yesterday morning. At 23 years old, Jake was in his last year of college, but he might not finish. He had no money left. Jake looked at the bills on his desk. Rent was due in 3 days. His power bill was overdue. The student loans kept piling up. His part-time job at the coffee shop didn't pay enough. He had already sold his laptop and was using the old computers at the school library. Another day, another dollar, Jake said to himself as he got ready for work. He put on his only clean shirt and his worn-out shoes. The sole of his left shoe was coming off. He used tape to hold it together. Outside, it started to rain. Jake didn't have an umbrella. He covered his head with an old newspaper and ran to the bus stop. He missed the bus by seconds and had to wait 30 minutes for the next one. When Jake finally got to the coffee shop, his boss looked angry. "You're late again, Wilson," Mr. Parker said. "One more time, and you're fired." "I'm sorry, sir. The bus was. I don't want excuses. Just get to work." Jake worked hard for 8 hours. His feet hurt, but he couldn't sit down. A group of rich college students came in. They were loud and left a big mess. One of them, a girl named Brittany who was in Jake's economics class, didn't even look at him as she ordered an expensive coffee drink. "Can you clean this up? We're in a hurry," she said without saying thank you. Her friends laughed as they left. After work, Jake went straight to the library. He had a big test tomorrow and needed to study. The librarian, Mrs. Lewis, smiled at him. "The computers are all free, Jake, and I saved something for you." She handed him a sandwich. "My husband packed 2 lunches today by mistake." Jake knew it wasn't a mistake. Mrs. Lewis often found extra food for him. He was too hungry to say no. "Thank you," he said, his eyes showing how grateful he was. He studied until the library closed at 10 p.m. It was still raining when he left. The buses had stopped running, so Jake had to walk home. His shoes got soaked and the tape came off. By the time he got to his apartment, his feet were wet and cold. The landlord, Mr. Gonzalez, was waiting for him. "Rent is due this week, Wilson," he said. "No more delays." "I'll have it, sir," Jake lied. He didn't know how he would get the money. Inside his apartment, Jake found that the roof leak had gotten worse. Water was now coming in through 2 spots. He moved his bed to the only dry corner and put more buckets down. Too tired to even feel sad anymore, Jake checked his phone. There was an email from the college. His application for more financial aid had been denied. Without that money, he couldn't register for next semester's classes. Jake sat on his bed and put his head in his hands. He had worked so hard to get into college. His mother had been so proud before she died 2 years ago. He had promised her he would graduate. Now it seemed impossible. He had exactly $27.35 in his bank account. Rent was $650. His next paycheck wouldn't come for another week, and it would be less than $300. Jake was about to give up hope when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello," he answered. "Is this Jake Wilson?" asked a formal-sounding woman's voice. "Yes, this is Jake. My name is Deborah Jenkins. I represent Mrs. Eleanor Thompson. She would like to meet with you tomorrow regarding a potential job opportunity." "Mrs. who? I think you have the wrong person," Jake said, confused. "No, Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Thompson specifically asked for you. She's offering $200 just for meeting with her. Does tomorrow at 10 a.m. work for you?" Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. $200 just for a meeting. It sounded too good to be true, but he was desperate. "Yes," he said. 10 a.m. is fine. Little did Jake know that this phone call would change his life forever. Jake couldn't sleep that night. The rain kept hitting the buckets, making loud noises, but it was mostly the strange phone call that kept him awake. Who was this Mrs. Thompson, and why did she want to meet him? Morning came, and Jake put on his best clothes. They weren't very nice, but they were clean. He tried to fix his shoe again with fresh tape. He checked the address he had written down. It was in the richest part of town. Jake took the bus as far as it would go. Then he had to walk for 20 minutes. His feet hurt in his broken shoes. Finally, he saw it. A huge house with tall gates. This can't be right, Jake said to himself. But the number on the gate matched his paper. He pressed the buzzer with a shaking hand. "Hello," said a voice. Hi, I'm Jake Wilson. I have a meeting with Mrs. Thompson." The gates opened slowly. Jake walked up the long driveway. The front yard was bigger than his whole apartment building. There were flowers everywhere and a fountain with clear water. A woman in a uniform opened the door before Jake could knock. "Mr. Wilson, please come in. Mrs. Thompson is waiting in the library." Jake stepped inside and almost gasped. The entry hall was huge, with a shiny floor and a chandelier that sparkled like stars. He followed the woman down a long hallway with paintings on the walls. "Wait here, please," the woman said, stopping at a door. She went inside, then came back out. "You may go in now." Jake took a deep breath and entered the room. It was filled with books from floor to ceiling. A fireplace had a small fire burning. In front of it sat an old woman in a fancy chair. "Mr. Wilson," she said, looking at him with sharp blue eyes. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Thompson," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "Please, sit down." Jake sat in a soft chair across from her. He tried not to stare at her, but it was hard. She was very old, maybe in her 80s, with white hair in a neat bun. She wore a simple but expensive-looking dress and pearls around her neck. "I'll get right to the point," Mrs. Thompson said. "I saw you at the library last week. You were helping an old man find a book. Then you carried it to his car for him." Jake remembered. The man had trouble walking. "It was nothing," Jake said. "It was kindness," Mrs. Thompson corrected him. "Something rare these days. I ask about you. Mrs. Lewis speaks very highly of you." Jake was surprised the librarian knew this woman. "I need someone to help me around the house," Mrs. Thompson continued. "Someone honest, someone kind. My last assistant quit, and at my age, I need help with certain things." "What kind of help?" Jake asked. "Reading mail to me. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Driving me to appointments. Helping me manage my correspondence. Simple tasks. I'll pay you $30 an hour, for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week." Jake did the math quickly. That was $600 a week, more than twice what he made at the coffee shop for a lot less work. "That's very generous," he said, wondering if there was a catch. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Thompson said. "You would need to live here. The east wing is empty. You would have your own bedroom, bathroom, and sitting room. All meals included." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. A job, a place to live, and food. It would solve all his problems at once. "Why me?" he asked. "You don't even know me." Mrs. Thompson smiled. "Sometimes you can tell a lot about a person from small actions. Will you accept the position?" Jake thought about his leaking apartment, his angry boss, and his empty bank account. But he also thought about how strange this all was. "Could I start next week?" "After my final exams?" he asked. "Your education is important," Mrs. Thompson nodded. "But you need help now, don't you? Here," she handed him an envelope. "Your first week's pay in advance, and I insist you stay for lunch." Jake opened the envelope. Inside was $600 in cash. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking a little. "I accept the job." He didn't know then that working for Mrs. Thompson would change his life in ways he could never imagine. 2 weeks passed quickly. Jake finished his exams and moved into Mrs. Thompson's mansion. His new rooms were bigger than his whole old apartment. He had a soft bed that didn't get wet when it rained. There was a TV, a computer, and even a small fridge filled with snacks. His first day of work was easy. He read the morning newspaper to Mrs. Thompson while she had her tea. Then he drove her to a doctor's appointment in her big black car. He waited in the waiting room, reading a magazine. After that, they went to lunch at a fancy restaurant where the waiters knew Mrs. Thompson by name. "How are you settling in, Jake?" Mrs. Thompson asked as they ate. "Very well, thank you," Jake said. "Everyone has been very kind." "Good. Tomorrow I'll show you my filing system. I need help organizing some papers." Day by day, Jake learned more about Mrs. Thompson. She had been married once, to a man named Howard who made millions in real estate. He died 15 years ago. They never had children. She had a sister who lived in France and rarely called. Jake enjoyed the work. It was much better than the coffee shop. Mrs. Thompson was strict but fair. She liked things done a certain way, but she never yelled like Mr. Parker had. One evening, after a month of working for her, Mrs. Thompson asked Jake to join her for dinner in the main dining room. Usually, he ate in the kitchen with Maria, the cook. The dining room was huge, with a long table that could seat 20 people, but only 2 places were set, one at each end. "No, come sit here," Mrs. Thompson said, pointing to the chair next to hers. "I can't shout across the table at my age." During dinner, Mrs. Thompson asked about Jake's studies and his plans for the future. "I'm studying business," Jake said. "I want to start my own company someday." "What kind of company?" "A small coffee shop, maybe, but one that treats its workers well." Mrs. Thompson nodded. A good plan. Howard started small too. After dinner, Mrs. Thompson took Jake to a room he hadn't seen before. It was a small sitting room with photos everywhere. "This is my memory room," she said. "All the important moments of my life are here." Jake looked at the pictures. Mrs. Thompson as a young woman, beautiful with dark hair. Her wedding day. Trips to far places. Always smiling. Always with the same tall man with kind eyes. "You loved him very much," Jake said, looking at a photo of Mrs. Thompson and her husband dancing. "Yes," she said simply. "It's been lonely since he left." For the first time, Jake saw sadness in her eyes. He realized that all her money couldn't bring back the person she loved most. "Do you have a girlfriend, Jake?" Mrs. Thompson asked suddenly. "No," Jake said. "No time between work and school. No family either, I understand. Just an aunt in Ohio. We're not close." Mrs. Thompson was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke in a different voice, more serious. "Jake, I'm dying." Jake was shocked. "What? But you seem fine." "The doctor. The doctors can't help. I have 6 months, maybe less." Jake didn't know what to say. He had only known this woman for a month, but he had come to respect her. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Don't be. I've had a good life, but I need to put my affairs in order. That's partly why I hired you." Jake felt cold. Was she going to ask him to help plan her funeral? "I've been watching you, Jake. You're kind, smart, and hardworking. You remind me of Howard when he was young." Jake stayed quiet, not sure where this was going. "I have a proposal for you," Mrs. Thompson said. "One that will seem strange at first." She took a deep breath. "I want you to marry me." Jake thought he had heard wrong. "I'm sorry. What?" "I want you to become my husband before I die." Jake stared at her. This had to be a joke. But Mrs. Thompson looked completely serious. "But why?" he asked. "Because I need an heir. Someone who will use my money wisely. Not my greedy nieces and nephews who never visit. Not my sister who only calls when she needs money." She held up her hand when Jake tried to speak. "Let me finish. This would be a marriage in name only. You would inherit everything when I die. The house, the money, the businesses. All I ask is that you use some of it for good causes, and that you stay with me until the end." Jake's head was spinning. This was crazy, but he could see that Mrs. Thompson was waiting for an answer. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, she said. Take all the time you need. But remember, I don't have much left. Jake couldn't sleep that night. Mrs. Thompson's offer kept playing in his mind. Marry her? It seemed crazy. She was 82 years old. He was only 23. What would people think? He called his only friend, Mike, the next day. She wants to marry you. Mike asked in shock. The old lady you work for? Yes, Jake said. She's dying and wants me to inherit her money instead of her greedy relatives. Dude, this is weird. Really weird. I know, Jake said, but she's been so kind to me. Are you thinking about saying yes? Mike sounded worried. I don't know. It would solve all my money problems forever. But marrying someone for money, that's not like you, Jake. Jake knew Mike was right, but he also knew that Mrs. Thompson truly needed someone to care for her in her final months. And she was right about her family. They never visited her. For 3 days, Jake thought about the offer. He still did his job, driving Mrs. Thompson to appointments and reading to her. She didn't mention the proposal again, but he could feel her watching him. On the 4th day, Jake made his decision. He found Mrs. Thompson in the garden, sitting on a bench among the roses. I've been thinking about your offer, Jake said, sitting next to her. And? She asked quietly. I'll do it, he said. I'll marry you, but not for the money. Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow. I want to help you, Jake explained. You've been kind to me when no one else was. You deserve to have someone care for you now. Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Jake. You are a good man. But I have one condition, Jake said. I want to finish college. I promise I'll still take care of you, but I need to complete my degree. Of course, Mrs. Thompson said. Howard would have wanted that too. Education was important to him. They decided to have a small, quiet wedding the following week. Mrs. Thompson called her lawyer, Mr. Greenwood, to change her will and prepare the marriage papers. Mr. Greenwood arrived the next day. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He looked at Jake with suspicion. Mrs. Thompson, are you sure about this? He asked when Jake left the room to get tea. Very sure, Charles, she said firmly. Jake is a good young man. There will be talk, Mr. Greenwood warned. People will say he's after your money. Let them talk, Mrs. Thompson said. I don't care what people think anymore. When Jake returned, Mr. Greenwood was all business. He explained the new will. Everything would go to Jake after Mrs. Thompson's death. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, and the family business. It was worth over $50 million. Jake felt dizzy hearing these numbers. He had never thought about that much money before. Do you understand everything, Mr. Wilson? Mr. Greenwood asked. Yes, Jake said. But I have a question. Can some of the money be used to create a scholarship for students who can't afford college? Mr. Greenwood looked surprised. Mrs. Thompson smiled. See, Charles, this is why I chose him. The news of the upcoming wedding spread quickly. The next morning, Jake found a newspaper on the kitchen table. There was a small story about him and Mrs. Thompson. The headline read, 82-year-old millionaire to a 23-year-old student. The story made it sound like Jake was tricking the confused old woman. It called him the gold digger and fortune hunter. Jake felt sick reading it. This was exactly what he had feared. Mrs. Thompson found him staring at the paper. Ignore it, she said. I know why you're doing this, and that's all that matters. But the article was just the beginning. That afternoon, Mrs. Thompson's phone started ringing. Relatives she hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to visit. Tell them I'm not available, she told Jake. They smell money, that's all. Then a woman arrived at the door without calling first. She had the same blue eyes as Mrs. Thompson, but a harder face. I'm Patricia, Eleanor's sister, she told Jake coldly. I need to speak with her immediately. Jake didn't want to let her in, but Mrs. Thompson heard her voice and called out, Let her in, Jake. I might as well face the storm now. Patricia stormed into the living room, her face red with anger. Have you lost your mind, Eleanor? She shouted. Marrying a boy young enough to be your grandson. The family is in shock. The family hasn't cared about me in years, Mrs. Thompson said calmly. We're trying to protect you, Patricia said. This boy is obviously after your money. She turned to Jake. How much is she paying you? Whatever it is, we can match it if you leave now and never contact her again. Jake stood up, angry now. I'm not after her money. I care about Mrs. Thompson. Oh, please. Patricia sneered. No one believes that. That's enough, Mrs. Thompson said firmly. Jake, please leave us. I need to speak to my sister alone. Jake left the room, but he could hear their angry voices through the door. He felt terrible. He was causing problems for Mrs. Thompson when she was already sick. Maybe this marriage was a mistake after all. The wedding day arrived quickly. Jake stood in his new suit in the garden of Mrs. Thompson's mansion. Only a few people were there. Mike is Jake's best man, Mr. Greenwood the lawyer, and Mrs. Lewis, the librarian who had first told Mrs. Thompson about Jake. There were no guests from Mrs. Thompson's side. After the fight with her sister Patricia, Mrs. Thompson had refused to invite any family members. They only care about my money, she had told Jake. Not about me. Jake felt nervous. Was he doing the right thing? Part of him still couldn't believe he was about to marry an 82-year-old woman. Mrs. Thompson appeared, walking slowly down the garden path. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small bunch of flowers. She looked elegant, Jake thought, and sad. The ceremony was short. They said their vows, and Jake gently placed a gold ring on Mrs. Thompson's thin finger. Then it was done. Jake was now Mr. Thompson. After a small lunch, the guests left. Jake and Mrs. Thompson sat in the garden. For the first time, Jake felt awkward with her. Should I call you Eleanor now? He asked. She smiled. Yes, I think that would be appropriate between husband and wife, don't you? Jake nodded. It still felt strange to think of this elderly woman as his wife. I have something for you, Eleanor said. She handed Jake an envelope. Inside was a bank card and a piece of paper with a PIN number. This account has $100,000 in it, Eleanor said. It's yours to use as you wish. Jake stared at the card. He had never held that much money before. I can't accept this, he said. You can, and you will, Eleanor said firmly. You are my husband now. What's mine is yours. Jake put the card in his pocket, feeling uncomfortable. He had meant what he said about not marrying her for money, but no one would believe that now. The next few days were busy. Jake started his new semester at college while still caring for Eleanor. It was hard to balance both, but Eleanor hired a nurse to help when Jake was at class. Jake didn't tell anyone at school about his marriage, but people found out anyway. He heard whispers when he walked into class. Someone had seen the newspaper article. One day, Professor Davis asked Jake to stay after class. I heard about your marriage, Jake, he said. Jake waited for the judgment, the disgust. But instead, Professor Davis surprised him. My grandfather did the same thing, he said. He married his much younger caretaker before he died. Everyone thought she was after his money, but she truly cared for him. She made his last days happy. Jake felt relief wash over him. Finally, someone who understood. Thank you for telling me that, Jake said. Just be prepared for more talk, Professor Davis warned. People can be cruel when they don't understand. At home, Eleanor seemed to be getting weaker. She slept more and ate less. The doctor visited frequently. One evening, as Jake read to her by the fire, Eleanor suddenly said, I want to show you something. She handed Jake a key. This opens the drawer in my desk. There's a red book inside. Bring it to me. Jake found the small red book and gave it to Eleanor. She opened it and took out an old photograph. "This is Howard when he was about your age," she said. Jake looked at the picture. The young man did look a bit like him, the same dark hair and serious eyes. "That's why I noticed you that day in the library," Eleanor said softly. "You reminded me so much of him." Jake felt a lump in his throat. All this time, he had been a replacement for her dead husband. "I know what you're thinking," Eleanor said, "but it's not like that. Yes, you reminded me of Howard at first, but I chose you because of who you are, Jake, your kindness, your determination. Howard would have liked you very much." Jake took her hand. For the first time, he felt truly connected to this strange, sad woman who was now his wife. "Tomorrow I want to take you to meet some people," Eleanor said. "Important people you should know." "Who?" Jake asked. "The board members of Thompson Enterprises. They need to meet the new owner." Jake's eyes widened. "But you're still the owner." "Not anymore," Eleanor said. "I signed everything over to you today. The house, the business, everything." "But why now?" "I thought, after you. Because I trust you, Jake, and because I want to see you take charge before I'm gone." Jake felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about responsibility. Eleanor was entrusting him with her life's work, her legacy. "I'll do my best," he promised. "I won't let you down." Eleanor smiled and squeezed his hand. "I know you won't. That's why I chose you." The next morning, Jake put on his best suit. He was nervous about meeting the board members. These were important business people who had worked with Eleanor and her husband for many years. What would they think of him? Eleanor wore a dark blue dress and pearls. She looked tired but determined. The driver took them to a tall building in the city center with the name Thompson on the front in big letters. "This is the main office of Thompson Enterprises," Eleanor explained. "Howard built this building 30 years ago." Inside, people stared at Jake. Some smiled politely, but others whispered as they passed. Jake tried to ignore them. The meeting room was large, with a long table and leather chairs. 10 people were waiting there, all in expensive suits. They stood when Eleanor entered. "Good morning," Eleanor said. "I want you to meet my husband, Jake Thompson." Jake noticed how she used his new last name. The board members looked at him with curious eyes. Some seemed friendly, but others looked angry. A man with gray hair stepped forward. "I'm Richard Daniels, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome, Mr. Thompson." Jake shook his hand. "Thank you, sir." Eleanor sat at the head of the table. Jake sat next to her. She took some papers from her bag. "As you all know, I've transferred ownership of Thompson Enterprises to my husband," she said. "From today, he will be joining all board meetings and learning the business." A woman with short blonde hair spoke up. "With all due respect, Mrs. Thompson, your husband has no business experience. Thompson Enterprises is worth billions. How can he possibly manage it?" "The same way Howard did, Susan," Eleanor replied calmly. "By learning, by working hard, by listening to experts like you." "This is ridiculous," said an older man at the end of the table. "We all know why this young man married you, Eleanor. He's after the money, nothing more." Jake felt his face get hot with anger. But before he could speak, Eleanor hit the table with her hand. "That's enough, George. My husband deserves your respect. I chose him because he is kind, honest, and smart. He will learn what he needs to know." The room went quiet. Jake was surprised by Eleanor's strong voice. Even though she was sick, she was still powerful. After the meeting, Richard Daniels asked to speak with Jake alone. "I've known Eleanor for 30 years, he said. "She's a smart woman. If she trusts you, I will too. But you need to learn fast. The company needs strong leadership." "I'm ready to learn," Jake said. "I know I'm young, but I won't let Eleanor down." Richard nodded. "Good. We'll start your training tomorrow." On the drive home, Eleanor looked very tired. Jake was worried about her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Maybe that meeting was too much. "I'm fine," she said. "But there isn't much time, Jake. I need to teach you everything I can before. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Over the next week, Jake split his time between college classes, board meetings, and caring for Eleanor. He slept only a few hours each night, but he was determined to learn everything he could. Eleanor was a good teacher. Even from her bed, she explained the business to Jake. She told him about Howard's way of doing things. He always treated his workers well, she said, paid them more than other companies, gave them good benefits. That's why they stayed loyal to him. Jake took notes on everything. He wanted to remember it all. One day, a letter arrived from Patricia, Eleanor's sister. Jake brought it to Eleanor's bedroom. "Do you want me to read it to you?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head. "Just throw it away. She only wants to upset me." But Jake was curious. After Eleanor fell asleep, he took the letter from the trash and opened it. "Dear Eleanor," it read, "I've heard from Mr. Greenwood that you've transferred everything to that boy already. Have you lost your mind? He'll throw you out of your own house now that he has what he wanted. When that happens, don't come crying to me. Your foolish sister, Patricia." Jake put the letter back in the trash, feeling sad. Patricia didn't understand at all. He would never hurt Eleanor or leave her. He had grown to care for her deeply. That night, Eleanor's condition got worse. She had trouble breathing. Jake called the doctor, who came right away. "She needs to go to the hospital," the doctor said. Jake rode in the ambulance with Eleanor. He held her hand the whole way. At the hospital, they took her to a private room. "Will she be okay?" Jake asked the doctor. The doctor looked serious. "We'll do everything we can, Mr. Thompson, but your wife's condition is very serious." Jake sat next to Eleanor's bed all night. He remembered how, just 2 months ago, he had been a poor student with no future. Now he was the owner of a billion-dollar company. But none of that mattered if Eleanor didn't get better. In the early morning, Eleanor opened her eyes. "Jake," she whispered, "you're still here." "Of course I'm still here," he said, squeezing her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Eleanor smiled weakly. "You're a good man, Jake Thompson. Howard would be proud." For 3 days, Eleanor stayed in the hospital. Jake barely left her side. He slept in a chair next to her bed. The nurses brought him food, but he hardly ate. All he could think about was Eleanor. Richard Daniels came to visit. He brought flowers and a stack of papers. "These need your signature," Richard told Jake. "The company can't wait, even at a time like this." Jake signed the papers without really reading them. He trusted Richard to handle things while he took care of Eleanor. On the 4th day, Eleanor seemed a little better. The doctor was surprised. "She's stronger than we thought," he told Jake. "She might be able to go home tomorrow." Jake was so happy he almost cried. He called Maria, the cook, and asked her to prepare Eleanor's favorite foods for when she came home. That evening, as Jake sat reading to Eleanor, a nurse came into the room. "Mr. Thompson, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your wife's sister." Jake looked at Eleanor. Her face had gone pale. "Do you want to see her?" Jake asked. Eleanor nodded slowly. "It's time to make peace." Patricia walked into the room. She looked older than when Jake had last seen her. Her face was tired and worried. "Hello, Eleanor," she said softly. "Hello, Patricia," Eleanor replied. Jake stood up. "I'll give you two some privacy." "No," both women said at the same time. "Stay," Eleanor said. "Your family now." Patricia sat in the chair on the other side of Eleanor's bed. For a moment, no one spoke. "You look terrible," Patricia finally said. Eleanor gave a weak laugh. "Always honest, aren't you?" "I was wrong," Patricia said suddenly. "About Jake. Richard Daniels called me. He told me how Jake hasn't left your side, how he's learning the business, how he really cares about you." Jake was surprised. He hadn't known Richard and Patricia were in contact. "I was jealous," Patricia continued, "of your money, of your perfect marriage to Howard. I was alone, and you had everything. Tears ran down Patricia's face. Eleanor reached out and took her sister's hand. I forgive you, Eleanor said. We're too old to stay angry. The next day, the doctor said Eleanor could go home. Jake was relieved. He helped her get dressed and into a wheelchair. Just as they were about to leave, the doctor asked to speak with Jake alone. Mr. Thompson, I need to be honest with you, the doctor said quietly. Your wife's condition is still very serious. This improvement might not last. You should be prepared. Jake nodded, his happiness fading. How long does she have? It's hard to say. Weeks, maybe. A month at most. Jake thanked the doctor and went back to Eleanor with a smile on his face, hiding his sadness. At home, Jake made sure Eleanor was comfortable. He set up a hospital bed in her favorite room, the library, so she could be surrounded by her books. Patricia visited every day, and the sisters talked for hours, making up for lost time. One evening, a week after coming home from the hospital, Eleanor asked Jake to bring her a small wooden box from her desk. This is for you, she said, handing him an old key from the box. It opens a door in the basement. There's something there I want you to see. Jake was curious. He had never been to the basement of the mansion. The key opened a heavy door at the end of a long hallway. Inside was a large room filled with shelves and filing cabinets. It looked like a small library or office. What is this place? Jake asked. Howard's private office, Eleanor said. No one has been in here since he died. Jake looked around in amazement. There were photos, letters, and notebooks everywhere. Howard kept records of everything, Eleanor explained. His business ideas, his thoughts, his secrets. Jake picked up a notebook and opened it. The first page read, My plan to help people. Howard believed that money was a tool to help others, Eleanor said. That's why he started Thompson Enterprises. Not to get rich, but to create jobs, to build things that would last. Jake read more pages. Howard had written about his dreams for the future, his worries, his hopes. It was like hearing the voice of a man who had been dead for 15 years. Why are you showing me this now? Jake asked. Because 7 days after our wedding, you'll find something shocking, Eleanor said. Something that will make you question everything. Jake looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? I can't tell you, Eleanor said. You have to find it yourself. But when you do, remember this moment. Remember that I trust you, Jake, and I believe you'll make the right choice. Jake wanted to ask more questions, but Eleanor looked very tired. Let's go back upstairs, he said. You need to rest. As he helped her back to her room, Jake couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor's strange words. What would he find in 7 days? What choice would he have to make? He had no idea that in 1 week, his life would change forever. Jake counted the days. Eleanor had said 7 days after the wedding, but their wedding had been weeks ago. What did she mean? He asked her about it the next morning. Not our wedding day, Eleanor explained. The day we were officially recorded as married. The paperwork was filed a bit later. Jake checked the marriage certificate. Today was the 6th day. Tomorrow would be the 7th. Eleanor grew weaker each day. The nurse stayed with her all the time now. Jake still had to attend board meetings and sign papers, but he hurried back to Eleanor as soon as he could. That evening, Patricia came to visit as usual. She brought old photo albums to show Jake. This was Eleanor when she was your age, Patricia said, pointing to a picture of a beautiful young woman with dark hair. All the boys were in love with her. Jake smiled. He could see why. Young Eleanor had the same sharp eyes and proud look that she still had now. And this is when she met Howard. Patricia continued, turning the page. The photo showed Eleanor with a tall man at a dance. They were looking at each other with such love that Jake felt like he was seeing something very private. They were perfect together, Patricia said with a sigh. I was so jealous. I wanted a love like that too. Did you ever marry? Jake asked. Patricia shook her head. Once. It didn't last. He wasn't Howard. She closed the album. Take care of my sister, Jake. She doesn't have much time left. After Patricia left, Jake sat with Eleanor. She was sleeping peacefully. He looked at her wrinkled face and thin white hair. It was hard to connect this frail woman with the beautiful girl in the photos, but her spirit was the same. Jake realized he had grown to love Eleanor, not as a husband loves a wife, but as a grandson might love a grandmother. She had changed his life in so many ways. He would miss her terribly when she was gone. The next morning, the 7th day, Jake woke up early. He felt nervous but didn't know why. Would he really find something shocking today? He checked on Eleanor. She was still sleeping. The nurse said she had a good night. Jake went to Howard's office in the basement again. He felt drawn to it. Maybe the shocking thing was there. He spent hours looking through Howard's papers and books. There were business plans, old letters, and family photos. But nothing seemed shocking. Tired and disappointed, Jake went back upstairs. He needed to check some emails in Eleanor's home office. As he sat at her desk, he noticed it was a bit wobbly. One of the legs seemed loose. Jake bent down to look at it. The leg had a small door on it, like a hidden compartment. Curious, Jake tried to open it. It was locked. He remembered the key Eleanor had given him. It didn't look like it would fit this small lock, but he tried anyway. To his surprise, it worked. The small door opened. Inside was a red notebook, just like the one Eleanor had shown him with Howard's photo. Jake took it out and opened it. It wasn't Howard's handwriting this time. It was Eleanor's. The first page had a list of names. David Mitchell, 26 years old. Robert Carter, 24 years old. Thomas Bell, 25 years old. Jake Wilson, 23 years old. Jake recognized his own name at the bottom of the list. Who were these other men? And why did Eleanor have their names? He turned the page and started reading. His blood went cold. David Mitchell, married June 15, 2018. Died of apparent heart attack July 30, 2018. Robert Carter, married November 2, 2019. Car accident December 18, 2019. Thomas Bell, married April 7, 2021. Drowned May 22, 2021. Jake's hands were shaking now. There were more notes under each name. Details about their lives, their habits, their deaths. All these young men had married Eleanor. All had died shortly after. And Jake's name was next on the list. He dropped the notebook like it was on fire. His mind was racing. Was Eleanor a killer? Had she married these men just to murder them? Was he next? Jake thought about the money, the company, the house, all now in his name. Was this all a trap? Get him to fall for her kindness, then kill him once everything was legally his. But why? It made no sense. If she wanted to kill him, why give him everything first? Jake picked up the notebook again and forced himself to read more. There had to be an explanation. Maybe this was the shocking thing Eleanor wanted him to find. But why? A soft voice from the doorway made him jump. I see you found it. Jake turned around. Eleanor stood there in her wheelchair, the nurse behind her. What is this? Jake asked, his voice shaking. Who were these men? Did you kill them? Eleanor's face was sad. I think it's time for me to tell you the whole truth, Jake. The real reason I married you. Jake helped Eleanor to a chair. His hands were shaking. Part of him wanted to run away, but he needed to know the truth. Those men in the notebook, Eleanor began, her voice weak but clear. They were like you. Young, poor, kind. I married each of them. And they all died, Jake said. His mouth felt dry. Eleanor nodded. Yes, but not how you think. She asked the nurse to bring her a small box from her bedroom. When the nurse left, Eleanor continued. After Howard died, I was very lonely. I had all this money but no one to share it with. No children. No close family, just greedy relatives waiting for me to die. The nurse returned with an ornate wooden box. Eleanor opened it and took out 3 letters. "These men didn't die because I killed them," she said. "They're alive and well, living under new names in different countries." Jake stared at her in shock. "What?" "But the notebook." "A test," Eleanor explained. "A test I created for each of my husbands. Let me explain from the beginning." Eleanor told Jake how, after Howard's death, she decided to find someone worthy to inherit her fortune, someone who would use it wisely, not waste it. "I chose young men who showed kindness and character, but who needed help. I married them to make the inheritance legal. Then I tested them." "The notebook was part of the test?" Jake asked. "Yes. I wanted to see what each man would do when he found it. Would he confront me? Run away? Try to hurt me?" "What did the others do?" Jake asked. "David panicked and tried to call the police. He thought I was dangerous. Robert demanded money to keep quiet about the notebook. He thought he could blackmail me. Thomas simply disappeared in the night. He was too afraid to even face me." Jake looked at the letters in Eleanor's hands. "These are from them." Eleanor nodded and handed him the letters. Jake read them quickly. Each letter thanked Eleanor for the money she had given them, enough to start new lives somewhere else, with new identities. "I gave each of them a choice," Eleanor said. "Stay as my heir if they pass the test, or take some money and start fresh somewhere else." They all chose to leave. So their deaths were fake. Just stories you made up for the next husband to find. Yes, I needed the stories to be scary enough to reveal each man's true character. Jake put down the letters. "But why go through all this? Why not just choose someone to give your money to?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "Money changes people, Jake. I needed to know how it would change the person I chose. Would they stay kind? Would they still care about others? Or would the money make them greedy and selfish?" "Did I pass your test?" Jake asked quietly. "You're still here, aren't you? You found the notebook, and instead of running away or calling the police, you waited to hear my explanation. You wanted to understand." Jake thought for a moment. "So what happens now?" "That depends on you," Eleanor said. "You can leave, like the others. I'll give you enough money to live comfortably. Or," Jake asked, "or you stay. You inherit everything. But with one condition." "What condition?" "That you find your own successor someday. Someone worthy. Someone kind. And you test them, just as I tested you." Jake was quiet for a long time. He thought about his life before meeting Eleanor. His leaking apartment. His empty bank account. His hopeless future. Then he thought about all he had learned from Eleanor and Howard, about using wealth to help others, about responsibility. "I'll stay," he said finally, "and I promise to find someone worthy when the time comes." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Jake. I hope you would be the one." 2 weeks later, Eleanor died peacefully in her sleep. Jake held her hand until the end. At the funeral, only a few people came: Patricia, Richard Daniels, and some of the household staff. No greedy relatives appeared. After everyone left, Jake stood alone by Eleanor's grave. "I'll keep my promise," he whispered. 1 month later, Jake sat in Howard's office in the basement. He had set up a desk there and was reviewing plans for a new project, a scholarship fund for students who couldn't afford college. The phone rang. It was Richard Daniels. "The board approved your scholarship plan," Richard said. They were impressed. Even George voted yes. "Thank you for your help," Jake said. "I couldn't have done it without you." After hanging up, Jake looked at the photo of Eleanor and Howard that he had placed on his desk. They were both smiling. Next to it was a small framed note that Eleanor had left for him. It read, "Wealth is not about having a lot of money. It's about making a difference with what you have." Jake smiled. He had once been a poor student who married an 82-year-old millionaire woman. Now he was a man with a purpose, carrying on the legacy of two remarkable people. And someday, when the time was right, he would find someone worthy to continue that legacy.